This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Okay.
We've laid a lot of groundwork here for the REM model. Let's talk about what this model is, because you've said a number of things. So since you shared your working paper with me and you shared it with me, I don't know, whatever, it was about a month and a half ago. Oh my gosh, I keep texting you, you laugh because I'm like watching TV shows, applying, does the REM model there? Do I see it there? Do I see it there? And I really am seeing how practical and useful this lens is. It's a way to look that gives me some understanding and some way to start to move, unravel what needs to be unraveled, re-ravel maybe what needs to be reinforced. So let's first just start with, what is it? So can you just give us a kind of a brief, like, what is it? And then we'll talk about the how.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say that this is the result of 12 years of work in recovery and education, and not just recovery, because recovery is something that happened for me. I kind of put my cherry on top of that a couple of years ago, right? Like, okay, I'm done, right? In terms of recovering from Scientology. I no longer, wake up with nightmares. I'm not, in the trauma of it. I've had the therapy. I've had a lot of education. I've done a lot of work daily, educating other people, working with other people, and trying to unravel, as you say, Scientology itself and L. Ron Hubbard as an individual. And there are lots and lots of questions and lots of mysteries that are created by these cult leaders and by their systems for the membership. And when you come out, you realize you only got, the cover story. You only got a little bit of the bigger picture of what this thing was really all about. Not only the history story of it and the actual origin story of it, which is always different than what the founders tell you. L. Ron Hubbard's Scientology origin story is radically different than the real origin story. Same with Warner and Est. So there's learning about those things and getting all those facts straight and kind of learning how it really happened. But then there's also unraveling all the mechanisms and things that were done to you. And it was in doing that and sort of taking apart the structure of Scientology, if you will, that I needed to do that for myself as part of my own work, because I needed to understand what happened to me. And that's a question a lot of ex-cult members have, is what the hell just happened to me?
That's what a lot of and people are just sort of in different places. But those of us that really started, because my book was, and this isn't even to brag on my book, although I'm fine with that for the record, but that's a big opening for me, because, I'm responsible for everybody else. But it was like, oh, we can talk about this. There's at least a place where we can talk about all the things we haven't been okay to talk about. And then in the talking about it, exactly those phases. Wait, what? He sold it for what?
Yeah.
What? Their salary is what? This was happening. What? So that you just described it so well. And I don't think you can bypass that, guys. So for those of you, my audience out there listening, please reach out, tap in. We have so many resources now for people to just start to unravel at the pace that is comfortable and safe for you, that feels good, that's supportive. Rachel Bernstein has been amazing. We had yesterday, our whole session, our little group session was all about somebody had an experience of a friend who's a deeply involved Landmark person saying to them when they missed a call, it doesn't work for me when you. And we all had to laugh because we've all gotten those calls. It doesn't work for me when you, Chris, and it's all about the integrity model and Landmark. And we all realize, like, wait, we got implanted with that little bug. Well, wait, what's the bug? What's that virus? What is that? Oh, that who I am is totally and only a function of my word. And that's all I need to live an effective, productive, healthy life is just be your word. No, you're more than that.
Exactly.
You're way more than just your word, right? That can be a powerful tool. This is what I mean. Like, it's a tool in a whole huge tool chest. That can be a powerful tool. And I swore to always tell the truth. So I will acknowledge where there's actual usefulness in certain ideas. That's not a unique idea to Landmark by any stretch. But anyway, so you just described that really well, that like I do think you have to do that work to some extent. For some people, it's faster. Some people it's slower. Some people it's easier. Some people it's harder. Like everybody has their own unraveling to do. And so anyway, thanks for describing that so well.
Yeah, it's vital. I feel worse for the people who aren't willing to or don't feel it's necessary to do that work. Mm-hmm. I do. I feel bad for them because there's so much you can't know. Not only do you not know, but you can't know what you don't know.
Not if you're not willing to look and talk and
when you learn something new about yourself and the experience, it can change everything. Literally on a dime, you can just change, right? And it's your view about a thing, right? I don't mean you change, but your views about a thing, and it can really help to trigger off or click off a whole series of realizations or epiphanies or reframings or whatever wording you want to use for this, that is really just a new way of looking at it. And that's what you deny yourself if you don't do the educational dive and really spend some time examining this. And so, I could certainly be accused of overanalyzing it if I'm working on it for years on a daily basis, but I do feel there's a lot of value in that. And I feel that plumbing those depths of ourselves teaches us things that we were in the cult to learn, but we didn't quite get it. And now we have an opportunity to do it ourselves because we are the source of our own power and life. And so, it was never somebody else's gift to give us our life. We have to find it ourselves. And that's, I think, what this journey can be for people. So I was compelled along on this journey by the question of what the hell happened to me. And that's what I spent a lot of years after Scientology working on. And I really wanted to get my head around it. And I had an opportunity and the tools to do so. And I started a YouTube channel, which grew, and I did not know where I was going or what was happening with any of this. I was just kind of like, well, people have questions and I have answers. I'll give them to them, right? And I'll just keep breaking this down for people.
Part of your own deconstruction process too. I mean, that's part of why I'm here today. This is part of my deconstruction, and I've really enjoyed that. We'll definitely, I link your show a lot, but I'll link it in the show notes, of course. And speaking of cults, it's really great, pod or YouTube, whatever's your jam. Right. And but what I love about it is you are so authentically there, like, like inquiring and all that. Anyway.
Absolutely. I said from the very beginning that my channel was me documenting my own recovery, and I'm bringing everybody else along for the ride, and that's what it was. And so learning about a lot of different things allowed me to start seeing a lot of things, and things a lot of us, a lot of the people who are watching this video have also come to on their own, right? The realization that that there's a playbook, that there's a checklist that cult leaders can kind of follow, and if they check off all these boxes, wow, look at this, I can control people and I can influence them to give me a lot of money or power or sex or whatever, and there's this set of ideas and these ways and methods you use to accomplish that. And turns out, whether you're Jim Jones or you're, Soko Asahara, or whether you're L. Ron Hubbard or Werner Erhard, they all follow these same playbooks. And you go, wait a second, there wasn't anything special about L. Ron Hubbard. I thought, he was my special victimizer and my very special raised up, narcissist. No, he was just run of the mill, regular Joe, narcissist, megalomaniac, right? Guess what? There's thousands of them. And L. Ron Hubbard was just one of many who utilized these techniques or came up with methods of dominating people and controlling them and suppressing them. And so that's one of the things you learn along the road is, there's a playbook.
And the followers, because one of the things that was very interesting about being in Landmark in a period in which Werner had been erased, right? So when I came into the organization, Werner had been erased. He had separated, he'd left, he didn't have anything to do with the organization, blah, 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 blah. Then fast forward, by 2012, before that, I knew that Werner consulted from time to time and he would appear, and he was the source and blah, 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 whatever. working with him in the Being a Leader project, I started to see there was way more tie-in than I had been told, but it still wasn't bad. It was actually useful. In fact, there was a point he was working with them. He had observed a forum and said, "You guys screwed this all up. Like, this is just totally stupid." And then he was working with them to redo the distinctions. And I sat in the room while he did some of that work. And I was actually kind of grateful because he was putting it back to the way I had experienced it in the 90s as one particular distinction. And it made way more sense. So one of the things that I've seen in just, this is, I think, more related to the Landmark lexicon. He's never not been involved financially. He lives off of Landmark. A lot of the money, if you want to know where a lot of your ESOP money is and this and that, it's gone to pay Werner. Werner has bought and sold the same technology over and over and over, taken tens of millions of dollars out of that organization that could have gone to staff. So I'm not going to whitewash that at all. I do have to say, having then worked with Werner, one of the things, the stuff that people do in Werner's name is so stupid and so literally not what Werner would do. Like I would go in and go, that is not what Werner would do. Like, if you want to evoke the source, let me evoke him for you and say, that's not what Werner would do. So there's a kind of gestation and growing that happens. Now L. Ron Hubbard, he was such a prolific writer. Werner doesn't have nearly that much content. All of his content is carefully hoarded for just a few. So, and he only gets to interact, you only get to interact very small. So his influence is actually, it's weird, it's big, but not so much in his direct influence. It's big in people's interpretation of what Werner would do, because he created this whole lexicon called, I'm going to recreate myself. The job of a forum leader was to become Werner in the world. That was that. And then that never left the culture. The culture never shifted. But it is really funny to me sometimes, having worked with him directly and then the organization, to just go, man, you people don't get it. Like because I have the same thing with Jesus, right? It was the whole saying, what would Jesus, I'm now a Mary of Magdalene. My view of Jesus is more from the apostles of Mary, if he was even an actual person. So there's that piece too, the way that it grows and evolves, and as people take it on and use it for their own domination.
Oh, very much so.
Own wealth and their own domination. So
anyway,
I want to just give a shout out to that aspect, because I actually think we diminish the problem if we make it about L. Ron and Werner and Keith Raniere and these bad guys, because it's too easy to go, well, they're gone. What people are doing in their name with their work and their organizations and their methods and processes. I mean, Werner hurts about 10 people at a time he's got that he's abusing. Well, Landmark in its heyday, Steph, had between 400 and 600.
Well, yeah, the reason these people are noteworthy is not because of what they do as individuals to other individuals. It's the fact that they create systems of abuse.
Yes.
And
there you go.
Those systems are self-perpetuating.
Yes. Okay.
What it is to start and run a cult, and to expect that, or think or have any idea at all that it is only one individual in this group who is the source of all the problems is very, very not how reality works. People come into these groups and every single person gives of themselves to the group and contributes and creates and helps it go. And sure, there's volunteering and following the orders, but there's also people coming in with their own ideas and mixing things up. And that happens all the time. And sometimes, often, the cult leaders will take those ideas and make them and take them as their own. Hubbard did this constantly. He was constantly bringing in new ideas, fresh faces, bright bulbs, who would come in and, oh, let's do this. And he'd go, absolutely. And then he'd take all the credit for it. Or maybe not. Maybe he'd, put it on Joe Blow's shoulders, right? Because you always need a scapegoat too when things go wrong. They're very, very good at that. That's part of the checklist, is having convenient scapegoats. So the founder is always held blameless when things go wrong. This is all part of the pattern of the operation of it. And any human group is put together that way. Cult leaders, cults are no different, right? People come in, they contribute of themselves. A lot of Scientology has L. Ron Hubbard's name on it, even though it wasn't L. Ron Hubbard's idea. Right. And that's just how groups operate. And that's, in fact, the fun of being in a group, is you get to be part of creating and molding the group. So, to the degree you can't do that, it becomes rigid and authoritarian and, all those horrible things. So certainly that is part of the picture. Where I was going with all of that, figuring out what happened to me thing is that this gave me, over the years, as terms of my model, what this gave me was exposure to an awful lot of very trained and educated professionals in a lot of different disciplines and fields, from psychology and sociology, neuroscience, neuropsychology, psychiatry, other fields that, might not seem to have a whole lot to do with this, like critical thinking or teaching and education and higher learning. All of these things were pools I was diving into often and repetitively. On my show, on my podcast, or on my videos, I would be talking to and interviewing these professionals. And in addition to interviewing former members of lots of different groups, not just ex-Scientologists, I started with that and focused on that for a long time. But I started also talking to former Jehovah's Witnesses and former Mormons and former Duggars, the Duggar folks, the IBLP Bill Gothard
Shiny Happy
group,
People.
the Shiny Happy People, right? I interviewed some of those folks and non-religious cults. And, sure enough, Landmark Forum came into my vicinity, and I interviewed an Australian woman who had worked down in Perth in Landmark. And I ended up talking to all these different people, and you read all the literature and you go, and I went and got an education and higher learning and got a master's degree in coercive control. And that all of those things allowed me or gave me opportunities to read and learn and talk with, professionals to get a multidisciplinary approach. And that was something that I kind of appreciated and talked about early on is there's no one bucket of study or inquiry that actually answers every question having to do with an experience like Landmark or Scientology. It's psychology, but it's also sociology, but it's also neuroscience, but it's all of these working together. And it was a guy named Robert Sapolsky, anthropology guy, who gave a series of lectures at Stanford University that were publicly accessible on the biology of human behavior. Human behavioral biology, right? And that was a whole nother topic of the biology of our behavior and, learning about the gut biome and how there's a whole nother mind going on down here. I mean,
right.
It's, and the kind of, and then, reading Bessel van der Kolk's, The Body Keeps the Score. And you learn about trauma and how it's stored in the body and how it's coming out, and it's coming out somehow, but you're not going to
staying in the closet.
But it's there and it's coming. Maybe it's weight loss, maybe it's weight gain, maybe it's headaches, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's emotional roller coasters. You can't predict where the trauma is going to come out, but it's coming. Right. So learning about all of these things started giving me more and more and more appreciation for the different areas in which we experience life. And for a long time, in fact, one of the saving things in my life, one of the most transformational, if you will, experiences that I had in the first year of leaving Scientology was hitting on critical thinking and really embracing it. And I mean, really embracing it. I went all in. And I read Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, which is to this day one of the best books I've ever read, because it doesn't tell me what to think. It taught me how to think. And that was really necessary after my cult experience. Thinking scientifically is what I would boil that down to. Carl Sagan's not a guru. He didn't have some 12-step program. He said, look, here's how science works. Maybe you should try it, right? And I was like, hey, that's cool.
Pretty cool.
So gravitating towards skepticism and critical thinking was sort of the first phase of this for me. And I thought for a long time, as we are wont to do when we come out of cult systems, I was looking for simple answers to complex problems. And this is, of course, what drives a lot of people in their thinking. And we see extreme examples of this in the conspiracy world or in the cult world, but we all kind of do it. It's called heuristics, right? We're all trying to take a few pieces of information and come up with the big picture from that. And I thought critical thinking was really going to be the big focus for me, and that was going to be, if I could teach critical thinking, if I could get it across, if I could get people doing it, we'd solve the cult problem, right? But here's what I ran into after a couple of years of that was it was letting me down, and there were these holes that people were falling into. And I was like, well, critical thinking doesn't account for that. It doesn't deal with that. You can teach logic, you can teach reason, you can teach logical fallacies, bad ways that people think, but that doesn't explain anything at all about our emotional life. It doesn't touch it. It says that that's not important. That doesn't really exist. You can Mr. Spock it. I'll just suppress the hell out of my emotions and I'll just be logical, and that's how it's going to work.
Well, that's what the Landmark lexicon tried to do. I mean, that was one of the things. Werner took all the weird spiritual alien shit out of Scientology,
right,
and tried to hone in on the rational. The rational aspect, and there's a whole thing in Landmark, bracket your what's going on with you internally. That's code for emotions. I do translation now. So since you told me stop using the language, and so I found all the new words. So, but that's what's going on with you emotionally, and the objective. And I don't think Landmark was the only one doing this. This was very central to their teachings, but it was very much a part of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Anyway, like if we could just get rid of all that pesky emotional response and action while at the same time totally exploiting it. Okay. So you got to do both. You got to completely exploit it to sell a bunch of shit, right? Shock and awe. That's what sells. But in performance training, it was all about, no. You got to become sociopathic. Put all that aside so that you can just deal with the situation as it is with nothing added, no meaning. And then that would be the height of performance. I mean, that's at the core of the human potential movement.
And it's just not going to fly because what I came to realize over the course of a couple of years of more research and more learning and really diving deep into emotion, pulling up a lot of literature, a lot of academic papers, a lot of research on that topic, led me to, the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett and her theory of.
I just started reading her. She's amazing. That's my next book on my list.
Yeah, she's the best. And there's other people who have done work in the emotion field, of course, right? I found a paper I like to talk about because it just it makes the point so well. I dug up this paper from 1980, ancient history in academic literature. But as of 1980, this paper was a compilation of every paper that could be found where they had defined the word emotion. And there were 91 or 92 definitions for the word emotion in all this literature, psychology, sociology, etc. And it became abundantly clear, even as of 1980, and it hasn't gotten better since then. There is no social science agreed upon centralized concept of what emotion is. But I came to realize in diving into emotional intelligence and the books and works on that this is one of those things where it's kind of funny because there isn't any human being, at least not any with a normal neurological brain and system, who hasn't experienced personal emotion every minute of every day of their entire life.
Right.
How do so there's a point where you kind of go, do I need to define this? Do I really need to nail this down? Because look at the fact that we all know what it is because we all experience it. And I sort of jokingly sort of summarized it all down for myself to, if cognition or regular critical thinking is thoughts that are happening in your brain, then emotions are thoughts that your whole body feels. And there you go. You can feel it in your toes. You can feel it in your tummy, right? But it's still thinking. So anyway, regardless of whether we can define emotion as a thing, and there are lots and lots of explanations for it, we all experience it, and we all agree we experience it. And we all agree, if we're being sensible people, that emotions can overtake us and control us in ways that we later regret, have problems with, wonder, how did that happen? Why did I do that? Right? All of that. And I came to realize, and this is not original thinking to me, that we are more driven by our emotional base than we are by our critical thinking or our logic or reason. that
Absolutely.
actually it's a flip, that it's not our thinking that is driving our behavior. It's our emotional reactions. And deeper than that, it's our emotional needs that are compelling us to do things, right? Which we later maybe think twice about, but in the moment, we are not thinking twice about it because we actually can't. The way the brain works, it shuts some parts down when other parts are working, right? And so it's this sort of push-pull. And you come to realize that the cognition, the thinking, reasoning part of our brain is spending 90% of its time, roughly, I'm just pulling that number, but about that much is spent justifying what we're doing because of our emotions, right?
Yes.
And so it's not that you calculate out what you're going to do and then do it. It's you feel your way to what's right or what's right, gut feelings, etc. And then we catch up with it by justifying it after the fact of it. And that sequence is really, really important to understand in how we behave. So once that was clear, I thought I had it. I was like, okay, balance between emotions, emotional needs, and our cognition, our thinking, and our reasoning, and how we use that to rationalize or justify why we're right. And we tell ourselves these stories. We tell ourselves narratives of our life.
Okay.
This person's the good guy. This person's the bad guy. We cast people in roles, that kind of thing.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff, right? So those two layers interacting, and I started thinking about this in terms of layers. I was thinking about, okay, so there's the surface level thinking that we all engage in 24/7. We're always thinking. We're
You always hear that talked about
too.
A lot as the conscious, right? Like, that's people who get into conscious, like the conscious thing is the stuff you can hear in your head,
exactly.
Exactly. And then you have the subconscious, which, anyway, I have all kinds of problems with this whole model, but I'm just saying in terms of how you hear it taught a lot in different new age personal development things a lot. They always talk about those two levels, but they never, in my experience, they'll still do everything to avoid the word emotion. I don't know what the problem is, but it's
and they shouldn't. We need to embrace it, right? Because we're emotional creatures. We are emotional driven creatures. Yeah. And I started thinking about this like an engine, and that an engine that drives our behavior, right? What's compelling us to do what we do? And I thought that these emotional needs, and there's different ways of categorizing them, but basically they come down to about 9 or 10 different buckets that we're trying to fill all the time, right? That's the analogy I use, is kind of buckets, right? And everybody has a different quota for what they need to fill each bucket with in order to be satisfied or happy or in a state of security and safety, because that's what emotional needs are about, is making us feel like we're safe and secure. And so how much community do you need? That's an emotional need, right? How much interaction with other people? How much sense of self and personal identity do we have? How about purpose or meaning in our life? What is it that we are we goal oriented? Are we moving in the direction of goals? Most every human being is in one fashion or another. How are they doing at filling that bucket up, right? And this is what compels us to do things. We'll quit a job because it's not satisfying for us. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means it's not fulfilling these needs that we have.
Right.
And so we change our life to fill those needs. And this is a bit of a longer term look at our life. There's emotional reactions in the moment. You get angry, you get sad, you get pissed off, you get triggered. But those come and go. Those are mercurial. They boom, boom. They're very changeable. Below that are these emotional needs, which are where we're just not satisfied over time if we're not fulfilling them. So those are what that layer is about. But there was a missing thing below this, right? And the more I looked into identity theory and personality psychology and that kind of stuff, it became clear that there's another layer we're also operating on. And this was abundantly clear in the cult space. And that is morality, right? Because what compels people at the deepest levels to commit and to really dedicate themselves to something, it's the sense that they're doing good, that they're doing right, that they are in a position that is considered socially or within themselves good or true or right. That's morality. when you start talking about good, bad, right, wrong, now you're in another layer. You're not talking about emotions. Emotions are, there's no value connected with emotions. They're just context specific. But morals are how we determine or think about how the world is supposed to be.
Right. So would you say then, so this is so good because I've been nagging Chris about this moral piece ever since you started talking to me about this, because I keep seeing the interplay, particularly between these two deeper, let's call them deeper, like meaning, more intense, more instinctual, deep. I don't know. Don't have a better word, like closer to, for sure, who you think you are. Right. So like one of mine is, and I still say this today, like I look at the things I do and I'm like, is this serving the greater good? Mm-hmm. Right. That's a question that I bring to myself quite often. Is this serving the greater good? Is this thing I'm doing? Is this channel I'm doing? Is this conversation I'm having? Is this thing I'm saying on social media, except for in the moments when I am having a pure emotional reaction, which I'm getting much better at not. Thank you, Rachel Bernstein. She always says this thing. So many of our different group calls, she says this thing about there really isn't anything that you could do today that you couldn't also do tomorrow, right? Like just put in that gap, right? So my thing about like I remember just being somewhere in my younger years, I don't even know where it came to be, but I was there to make a difference. I didn't have that language. I think it came when my mom signed us up with a pen pal in Africa, this boy who was my brother through World Vision. And let's be honest, what I loved, I was like 8 years old. I loved getting remember the envelopes with the airmail thing? A friend of mine gave me, she found a whole packet when she cleaned out her mom's house, a packet of the airmail envelopes. I have them in my closet. I'm like, I cherish them. I love them. But I swear that's where this moral thing of like, no, I'm connected. I can make a difference because we sent, whatever it was, $30, which honestly was a big deal for our family, to this kid in Africa. Mm-hmm. And that it was inside of that demonstration from my mother that I was like, oh, I'm here to help, to make a difference. Right. Mm-hmm. And, combined with, I've got a bunch of identity formulation. I won't bore you with that, but, about, escaping. My mother was abused and we escaped down the alley and, I'm 5 years old and I know that I'm saving my mother. So at 5, I know I have the power to save the world. And at 56, I'm learning, no, I don't. And oh my God, thank God. I know. But it's been 51 years of that. But there is a deep morality that's in there, right? Is that kind of what you're pointing to? Like that, this deep sense of, and I've believed part of the hardest thing of the last year is I found out all this new information about the organization and the leaders of Landmark is it's really upset my belief that fundamentally people are good.
Yeah, I get that.
That's been like, wait. And, now I'm enough through it to go, okay, well, they're good and bad. I got it. I mean, like we're not all good or all bad. But that was for sure a big part of my long-term participation in a group like that was because this is the highest and best use of me that's going to make the biggest and mostest difference in the world. Similar to yours. It's probably where we get along, right? So
we have these 3 layers and they basically are what compels us to do what we do. I mean, you can basically take everything that's going on and you can put it in one of those 3 layers and you'll pretty much have it. I mean, maybe I should show this.
Let's show. So there's three levels. So there's the rationalization or reasoning. And you said something when you first introduced this on your show that really caught me, that still gets me, which is that's always coming after the fact. You said it here too, but after I do the thing, after I feel the thing, after I, whatever, the rationalization, the reasoning, the meaning for my Landmark friends, it's all the same thing. That's the primary, there's that level. Right. And then there's the emotional level, right? Yep. And I really appreciate this thing you're pointing about. There's the emotions I'm having that are kind of transient, but then there's emotional needs that I'm driven by and for to seek. That's to, right. And I can see like so many people they stay in groups like Landmark, like Scientology, like whatever, they stay at a certain point. They're not even listening to the teachings aningmore. It's about the community.
That's right.
It's about, exactly. I mean, even now Landmark's not quite out of business, but they're way diminished and they only do online they're really reeling from, and for a lot of their participation and engagement was the community. It's the in-person contact.
That's
and
right.
So those emotional needs that we have as human beings, there's that layer. And then there is the moral foundation. And I don't know if you use the word foundation, but the more we talk about it, thinking of it, it's like, because it is so foundational, it's something that we really learn and adopt. And morals are basically what we view in societal norms, societal rights and wrongs, right?
That's right.
I have my personal values, but morals tend to be those societal drivers.
That's right. There's a moral foundations theory on which this has been inspired or based from Jonathan Haidt. He wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, where he talks about his theory of moral foundations. And he talks about them in a way that morality is compared to like taste buds. Like you have these, they're built in, and they're tuned to certain values or certain core principles: care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, right? These kind of dichotomies create moral concepts around which we base belief and action. And so that's a lot of what gave me this separate layer of moral foundations, which is foundational to our behavior, but it's a series of foundational beliefs that are kind of wrapped up in there. And it's more than just those beliefs. My model of a moral layer is not just Jonathan Haidt plugged in there. It's that what this all totals up to for a person, or what this means to a person's life and perception is, this is their list of how the world ought to be.
Yeah, it's your compass.
How things should be, right?
It's really, the program I used to teach was a lot about human development. It's a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, I now know. But anyway, and I'm doing this advanced certification in neuroscientific based coaching right now, and really loving it. And it fits completely, as we talk about, a human being is born and they have the architecture of a brain, as it were, but it's not formed really. That it's formed through experience and interaction, attachment, all of these things and it's getting pruned and shaped. And that's why we're all, John Atek said this on a conversation he and I had recently, we're all neurodiverse, because as we come in, we're shaped and pruned in different ways. But one of the things, any of us that have raised children heard this: that's bad, mommy. That's right, mommy. I remember my son one time was having a screaming fit, and he's, and now he's 2.5 years old, which means I am barely 18. And we're in this grocery store and he's trying to climb out of the cart or whatever. I mean, the kid had so much energy. And I pinch his shoulder to make him sit before he topples out onto the cement ground or whatever. And he screams at the top of his lungs, "Big people aren't supposed to hurt little people. I'm a little people and you're a big people." I pick him up out of the far cart. Now, this is a big deal, because when you don't have a lot of money, you go shopping once or twice a month when you get a paycheck, and then that's what you get for the month. So I had a full cart. I pick him up and just look straight ahead and march out of the store, right? Because I'm like, what are you going to do? But to me, when you start talking about morals, I'm like, all I can hear is, big people aren't supposed to hurt little people. This stuff is so at the core of how we see the world and ourselves and our place in it.
That's right.
So now let's talk about, so how does this apply to cultic influence, right? So we've got these three layers. So, and when you first started telling this to me, I immediately started thinking, because of course I'm also in the stage going, what the fuck was I thinking writing this book, right? Really, there's a lot of days. It would have been a lot easier to just stay in, especially given I had achieved such a level of success in terms of the relationships in the, I call it the WWW, Wacky World of Werner, right? So the Landmark lexicon. I promise you, my professional career would be a lot better right now if I had not written that book in some ways. Now, my soul would have been burning in hell, but I might have been making more money. So when you first introduced this to me, just personally, I was immediately recognized I couldn't, from when I started to learn about the abuse, which at that point was just in the Werner area, and then the conflicts of that with the project I had just done. And then when I saw opportunities for accountability keep going by and not happening, legal accountability, there was a whole opportunity for Werner to go, you know what? Yeah. As we used to say in Landmark, I've been such a fool. Here's how I can deal with the impact of my behavior on these people. And not only did they not do that, which is what I taught in their own lexicon. See, this is where the teachings didn't match the behavior.
Right.
And that kept being more and more and more of a problem. And it was the teachings were not matching the behavior at the top, at the source.
That's right.
So I'm like, okay, this isn't right. This isn't right. But most of all, for me, it was people are being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's reified my position that I did the right thing to speak up because I couldn't tolerate it. So is that that moral foundation being agitated?
Absolutely it is. Hypocrisy also is always a moral offense. And when people are not, reciprocity is a moral issue. So fair exchange and keeping one's word, right? Honor, integrity, discipline. These are all discipline less so, but certainly honor and integrity are moral words and live completely at the moral layer. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's all about social interaction, right? Morals are almost all the product of social interaction and demand. And so, you find out what's acceptable behavior within the groups that you're part of, and that's how you act, because that's how you set up your framework for what's acceptable and what's not. Because if you don't follow these, you'll be ostracized. And if you're alone and isolated and kicked out and shunned, that's bad. Now you don't get to share all the resources. Now you don't get to share conversation. Now you don't get to have relationships because you're over there and everybody's over here and they don't want you.
Now, this is where rationalization comes in, though, right? Because you said something earlier that I wrote down. I was like, oh, compromise, so because there does become a place where you start compromising. And I've heard this from almost everybody I've talked to, even now. They're like, well, yeah, I knew the staff was kind of treated pretty shitty. And I couldn't believe people would do that. But I guess, c'est la vie, it was up to them. This is where the victimization thing popped up for me, because I'm like,
that's right.
No, you don't understand coercion then. If you don't understand why these brilliant, magnificent people would actually stay in this organization. You described it really well, because they're staying there because they think that they can make a difference, and they start compromising their emotional needs, their physical needs, their whatnot. But that doesn't happen without that rationalization. Those aren't separate, right?
Exactly. These three layers are always interacting. And the way this works in terms of like a simple way of thinking about this in terms of cults, or a way of thinking about it is, okay, so the cult comes in with emotional based appeals. This is a logical fallacy, appeal to emotion, right? And yet everybody does it.
And the love bombing. You're amazing. You don't even know how great you are. You do these courses. You're going to be the most extraordinary aspect. So there's love bombing is in there with it, right?
Love bombing is emotional manipulation, but beyond love bombing, there's other ways of emotionally appealing to or influencing somebody. If a person were to walk in to a Church of Scientology and they just lost their husband, widow, she's grieving, she's traumatized, she's in a life-changing crossroads, they can love bomb her. What would work even better, and they will, but part of the hooking her is getting her convinced that the pain and suffering she's experiencing right now through her grief and loss can be assuaged, can go away. We can make it different. I can change your emotional makeup in Scientology with some Dianetics auditing, and you will feel better and you'll get over that loss. And this could have appeal to somebody who is really,
3 days in an evening. You don't need 3 years of therapy. You can handle that in 3 days in an evening. I mean, that's how.
Exactly. The psychs don't even know what they're talking about. We have the answers, right?
Trauma, you can cure your trauma. I've heard this from so many landmark leaders. And it's because they do not understand trauma, because they have zero, let's be very clear, zero actual credible trauma training in those lexicons.
That's right.
And as somebody who's walked beside my daughter has complex trauma for 10 years, like our understanding of trauma has evolved so much just in the last 5 years. I want to be fair about that. But
that's right.
But that it's this promise of you can be better, but it's not just you can be better, because I do think we can be better, and that we can. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm building a whole platform that's dedicated to lifelong learning, but it is a lifelong journey. It is not 3 days in an evening. And there is no external answer per se that is going to handle it forever. I mean,
Exactly.
So you're saying that part, that kind of promise, that engagement is speaking to those emotional holes, those emotional needs.
That's exactly what I'm saying, because almost all cult recruitment in one fashion or another relies on finding an emotional hook with which to reel the person in, just like a fish. And it's emotion that is used. It's not good reasoning or logic. It's emotion, right? It's appeals to emotion. And wrapped up in, often, appeals to moral foundations. The person feels upset because their boss is a dick and they're not getting a raise and they're not getting promoted and they're having a problem. And they believe that maybe they've been told by their boss or others, well, it's a you problem. Something wrong with you, right? And so the person is like, and they're looking for help and they're looking for change because they don't know what to change about themselves. And their friend says, oh, well, hey, maybe, you're having a problem with your boss. You're having a problem at work. You're not having a happy life. Why don't you come down to the Church of Scientology and we can analyze it and figure it out and find out what you need to do to change it. Well, the guy's desperate, right? He's not making the money. He's not moving up the ladder. His emotional needs are not being fulfilled by his job. And he thinks it's a moral issue. He thinks he's a slacker or he's lazy or he's somehow not coming up with the goods or right? Or
there's barriers to his full, I'll keep putting in the Landmark language for my Landmark listeners. There are just barriers to your natural self-expression, Chris. And if we dissolve those barriers, then you will be superhuman. You will be the extraordinary you that you actually are, which is really to me, it's a twist on ancient spiritual teachings, actually, that are much deeper and more involved, that we do have the access to joy, to ecstasy, to living, to happiness, but it's not in the absence of pain. It's in the fullness of all of it, right? Like they take these teachings and then kind of tried to secularize them and turn them into these like funky
they do.
Cliches. These funky cliches that are the answer. Okay, so these three layers are kind of interplaying and they're working together.
Yeah, okay. And in cult recruitment, what they're trying to do is the formula that is very workable for them is to hook you in with emotional appeal and or mix in moral appeal as well, because sometimes we are morally outraged or caught up in a moral dilemma of some kind. I don't know what to do with my daughter. I'm having this.
We don't see any of this happening in our society right now.
And mom's all conflicted and twisted up about this, right? And so she doesn't know what to do. She's got a conflicting moral issue of, am I supposed to be, assertive and dominating, or am I supposed to let my daughter be her own person? And where's the balance and all of that? And it's ruining my life because my relationship with my daughter is everything to me. And so that could be a problem somebody could be stuck in. And they're stuck in this moral, emotional dilemma. And so the cult listens and understands, right? Oh, well, this sounds like a very horrible thing. And, we have a class that you can take, or we have some auditing you can get, right? Or you have this seminar you can take. And, oh my God, it's going to change everything for you, right? And
coaching you can have him.
They want to change this, and here's somebody saying, well, I know exactly how to do it. It's really no different than, I have this nail that I need to drive into this table. Well, I got a hammer. Oh, great. Come on, let's do it. Right. And here we go. It's that kind of problem solving, but it's always based on emotional appeal and emotional reasoning. You're trying to find emotional weaknesses in the person to exploit. Basically, right. That's what the cult's doing. So they're not. And so the rational layer, the reason layer here is, of course, the means by which this is happening. We're communicating, we're exchanging ideas. That's all rational layer stuff. But the emotions are what give it power and impel a person to feel they need to act now. Because this emotional thing is causing them to feel upset, feel in pain.
Right.
Grief is painful. Trauma is painful. And the person wants relief in the same way that if you cut their hand, they want to stem the blood, right? They want relief from this. It's not just a rational conversation. It's one rooted in emotional pain or suffering or trauma.
Right.
And that's where the power to act comes from. And so when the person is told, don't think, act, right? Don't listen to your gut right now. You know what you need to do. You need to sign up for this. You need to pay us and you need to get going, right? And that's what you need to do. And that's that rationalization. That's where the rationalization layer is contributing to the problem, right? Because it's like, yes, act now, right? All those influence things from Cialdini come into play here, of all the ways I'm going to push you and motivate you to do this now.
Well, and that's why I was telling you, I think we were off camera. I don't think we were on camera yet, but I was talking about the large group awareness trainings that are designed or constructed to create these intense experiences, which in Landmark, we call it discovering for yourself. But what's really happening there, what they're referring to, is that provocative, that evoking of the feelings, of the emotions, because we all know, it is so well understood now that people's behavior and actions are driven by their emotions, right? That's that exactly is like everywhere. And Werner kind of took this down into, and I've seen a couple of other groups, not just his, I'm just most familiar with his, that are trying to say, as this big aha, that our behavior being actions. So our actions are driven by how we're seeing something or how it's occurring to us. That was the whole thing. That was the magic of the leadership course. That was the evolution of the course that I was hosting that then trickled back into Landmark is, aha, we got it figured out, So all you have to do is shift how you're seeing it, how you're observing it, mindset shift, right? Now, is there some truth in there? Is there some, yeah, kind of. I mean, I can look out and see a raining day, and I'm from Seattle and I feel comforted and I love those rainy days. There's not enough rainy days here in Texas in my world, but other people can be, oh, a raining day ruined my life. But they're trying to take that basic concept and turn it into a heuristic, into a rule that is always and only. And then, okay, you do want to shift your whole life, just shift how you see rainy days. And then boom, now you have power. So what I keep trying to point to here is that these teachings play on things that are real, but then I use the term weaponize them, which is dramatic, but it's dramatic on purpose, because what I'm saying is I weaponize them to manipulate or to influence in ways. So you ask myself all the time, okay, who's benefiting from my action here? That's how I deconstruct my influence. Okay, well, I'm benefiting. Am I really benefiting? Do I really need this new bubble bath? Do I really need, because it's all over marketing. I mean, you just described marketing.
Right.
But do I really need this thing? I actually have a shopping rule now. If 3 days later I still have to have it, then maybe I get to go buy it.
And that's exactly following the best advice I've ever been able to come up with, which is if you're facing an important decision, give yourself a few days before you act on it, because what will not change over those couple of days is the facts.
Right.
What will change is your emotional state.
Right.
That's what.
Okay. Let me throw another one in here, because you're speaking to the pain point, which is pretty well known, across a lot of disciplines. But there's another one I was listening to, this absolutely fantastic episode from Indoctrination. Rachel is talking to a Dr. Einstein who wrote a fabulous book, Hoodwinked. I'm going to go find her and have her come on and talk to me about this. But she brought up in that there's two drivers. So there's the fear and pain, but there's also awe.
Yes, that's right.
And I thought that was important, because groups like Landmark and even Scientology, to an extent, like the way you describe Scientology, what they're selling is awe, actually, possibility, a world that works for everyone. And so when you get into the emotion of that, it is the emotion, it's the experience of awe.
That's right.
And there was a whole segment, the division I used to work for, which was did a lot of R&D and exploration. They had a whole thing on awe for like a year, being in awe, living in awe, right? Okay, awe is an amazing thing. It's great. We're not saying don't have awe in life, but just be aware. I did not know that I could be manipulated through awe. I didn't know that.
Easily. It's one of the most easy things to do. Absolutely.
I thought because it was positive, because it was awe, because it was possibility, because it was the greater good. See how it fits my morals?
Oh, yeah.
Fits that moral foundation. And this was a place I really struggled with your model at first, until I got this little piece we're going to bring up right now, which is, I felt like there was a period as I look back and deconstruct where I was compromising my morals. But it only looks that way in hindsight. It did not look that way. And that's part of what I had to deal with. Like, oh, no. And you're doing some revisionist history here. In the moment, you were compromising certain things, like, I tell the story often of Warner said to me, oh, you should come to work for me. And I'm like, hell no, you create a hostile work environment. I would never work in that environment. And for somebody whose identity is around people being cared for and honored and respected, I did watch people being verbally abused, being diminished, being humiliated, but I was given a rationale for that. Right. The rationale I was given, and it was very convenient for me. I needed to believe that rationale. My financial future, my social future, all my emotional needs were based on believing that rationale, which is they agreed to it.
That's right. And
they agreed to it.
How we do it. That's how we do it.
And they get to make that choice. And
exactly. Well, see, all of these layers are malleable, but the top layer, but the deeper you go, and we say deeper because at the bottom of this whole thing is consciousness, right? Is core consciousness. So is really just the awareness that you are alive and that you exist. I mean, the real basic, most basic stuff. If you take all the morals away from a person and the emotional needs away and their thinking away, what are you left with, right? Well, basically core consciousness. So morals, that moral layer is kind of wrapped around our consciousness. It's the most basic set of ideas and philosophical concepts that we are capable of having. Right? The most basic laws within our mind of right, wrong, good, bad, right? This is core stuff. So it's changeable, but it takes time. It takes time to change our ideas of good and bad and right and wrong. Real core stuff. You've been carrying this stuff around with you since you were on the first playground you were ever on.
But there was still a line where it didn't, because my waking up, starts with Landmark rejecting me. Landmark telling me if I try to do business with Landmark graduates, they'll sue me. So it was first the betrayal of the family kind of thing. So that's the first thing that was just like heartbreak. But also then mixed right in these folks that were coming to her help started telling me the detail about the ways in which they were being harmed. They start telling me about being strangled. They start telling me, I don't talk too much about it because I honestly don't want to even give that much attention to that. I don't know, maybe that's part of my own healing. I'll get to the place where I can talk about the detail of what I know, but it's bad, people. It's bad. There are people being physically assaulted. It just is. And that was like this line. And look, I grew up in abusive situations. I understood that. And I had, I think, a child's like, okay, that's over here. I'm over here. I'm safe. That's the first line. But then as I've grown and matured, it's not okay with me if my neighbor's being beat either. It's not okay with me. And that's the part that I've really wrestled with even now, because I don't really want to get into all the salacious, yucky stuff, but it kind of seems like people aren't going to wake up unless they know that stuff, which I don't like that. And I haven't, I'm still working on that for myself, but it seems like it's operating well. And then moral outrage. Okay, so this is really good. This moral piece is totally fascinating to me. Chris knows because I'm texting him about it all the time. Because we also see that being exploited. So people have these strong feelings, and then somebody gives you a narrative to explain those feelings that provoke a kind of moral outrage. I mean, we're watching a lot of that happen in our world right now in a lot of situations.
That's right. Or a moral righteousness. Because
say more about that.
You can get people to do just about anything you want them to do if you convince them that they are on the side of right. Anything. You can get human beings to do anything you want them to do if you can work on them long enough and hard enough around and exert enough social pressure on them, right? In a group setting, it's easier and better to do this than one-on-one. You'll get faster results by instilling moral righteousness, right? By convincing these people they are right in everything.
It's actually really upsetting. Like, it almost makes me want to cry, because I've been, as we've been watching what's going on in our world for the last many years, but for this year, in I live in Texas, right? And I know lots of immigrant families, and they are absolutely amazing, wonderful people. I've done work in Haiti. One of the things that was so struck me is, you're there and these people are living in shacks and with dirt floors and no electricity and this and that. And they're joyful and they're having weddings and they're just like you and me. If you travel just a little bit, you see that. And I can now get, this is why having the pen pal in Africa when I was 7 or 8 or whatever was so impactful, because I'm like, he's just like, because the letters I'm getting from him is he's talking to me about going to school and his sister and how she annoys him and, all the same things that I've got going on in my life. But then to see people that I also respect and love harm others is hard.
Yep.
It's hard to see that, and it's hard to understand. So this is why one of the reasons why this model I think is so powerful, because it's, we've been talking about it in the context of cultic behavior, but anywhere where there's human beings gathering, there's cult, right? So it's not so much, we need to get over our pansy crap about the cult. There's cults everywhere, right? So the question is more, are they helping or are they harming? Like start there, like at least start one level up. And then, but that really, because the cruelty, there's many of us that are really, really upset at the just blatant cruelty that's happening and waking up to the cruelty that has been for a long time.
That's right.
I was deeply involved in the Katrina evacuation. We had a hotel that became home to, that we know of, just over 800 evacuee families. And we housed, clothed, fed, took to school, had weddings. We even set up a hair salon. Like we set up an entire transplanted, downtown New Orleans in our hotel. Right. And it was one of the most life-changing events, also very life-changing for me, because I learned a whole bunch about whole communities that they live as a community and they care for each other. But I also had to deal with seeing how much the country that I lived in did not take care of its people.
That's right.
That's not. Right. And way before Katrina, I'm watching, there's a great Netflix special out on Katrina right now. It's very well done. And I'm having to watch it one episode at a time because I saw it. And it's really good, folks. And I think we all should see it, because we need to get in touch with that aspect of our humanity that makes it just a little less okay to be so utterly cruel to each other.
Yeah. Exactly.
And to be utterly cruel to each other so that somebody can have more artwork or drive a better car or have a better apartment. Oh,
I know.
You have to say something uplifting now, because now I'm like,
no, I know it's bad, right? It's bad. Because and it's the simplicity of what happens when predators get at the top of a social hierarchy, right? And so whether it's an organization, a group, a cult, a club, a social, activity, they're a celebrity, it doesn't matter. If they're a predator, they start setting up codependent relationships with the people below them, and they start raining down abuse on them, and they call it a good thing, and they call it necessary. Sometimes they even call it important. And Warner did that. Hubbard did that, right? And Jim Jones eventually did that. And it's a trap that people can fall into. And it's a trap of human relationships. And there's no ending it. There's no getting away from it. It's a matter of understanding it so you don't get trapped in it in the moment, right? And that means that we have to understand ourselves. And this relationship between our emotional life and our moral life, and how we think and how we use our thinking to justify are sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes dumbass emotional needs and wrong moral foundations, because sometimes we get taught stuff that just isn't moral, but we are told it is, and we can get very righteous about that. And that combination of those things working together is what makes us who we are. So by breaking it down and understanding it, you're able to analyze yourself and other people a little bit better. And it's hard to do in the moment, because emotions are powerful by design. They're designed to control your body, to get you away from danger, to keep you safe, to keep you, gravitating towards the things you need. Even if you're not thinking straight, your body's still moving in those directions, right? It's all instinctive. So you understand that getting control of this, or it starts with an awareness of it, and then it's building up a kind of a discipline of paying attention to these issues in your day-to-day existence, right? I run into so many people who have no idea that they even have emotional needs, that this is a thing that even exists in their life. And if you don't even know, how could you possibly think you're in charge of your decision making when the whole mechanism and engine of how you make decisions is something you don't even know exists?
Well, here's something, but here's what I just saw actually in getting in touch with this for myself in this conversation. Because what I was going to ask you as we kind of look to wrap up here was like, okay, but what's the good? But I just saw something in just getting in touch myself with that. What you were talking about was one of the things, let's see, how do I articulate this? So much of personal development and human potential and religion and philosophy and whatever, wherever I put my stake in the ground is about getting away from those uncomfortable feelings.
Yes.
About getting so, because what I just experienced as I got in touch with like how deeply sad it is that we do these horrible things to each other. And I've spent a lot of this year trying to deal with that and knowing that actually the way out is through. So rather than away from, right? So I've got that little piece, but it still takes a lot to just sit there with that feeling. Just even in this conversation, I actually felt a little sigh of relief because my own suffering makes sense to me and actually gave me a sense of like, oh, I'm still me.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm still me.
Absolutely. Oh,
I'm
please.
still the person who loves people. I'm still that 8-year-old girl. I love that person.
That's right.
So I still get to be me.
There. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So this is such a fine line, folks out there listening. This is such a fine line. And Chris and I are going to be working together to develop this into a workshop so people can actually engage with this for themselves. And we want to share it with therapists and, people who can use this model to help people.
Yeah.
But I did have this question like, well, help them what? So we can say, okay, we can get away from cults and this and that. But I think it's actually much deeper than that. I think it's helping people to really connect with themselves. And that's all we join these cults for anyway, if we really tell the truth, isn't it?
Exactly.
But we just thought we get mixed up in the commercialization and the domination and the exploitation. And then we nettily think, because I remember saying this, like, oh, I know they're doing all that, but I don't have to participate in that. I mean, I stopped bringing guests to Landmark events. Well, first of all, I just ran out of people, but then I stopped bringing guests, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, and I would tell people even, go do the forum, but don't do the whole guest thing because it's all bullshit. It is bullshit, people. But but you can get the good stuff and ignore all that. Yeah, except for you take just a little piece of your soul with you when you do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
it's predatory, and that is the dark side of all of this, right? And this analysis or this model is not about just looking at the dark side. It applies just as much to all the reasons why we do good things too, right? Or valuable things, or things that are relationship positive or group positive, is because, again, we're fulfilling emotional needs. And those needs happen to be, in the main, good social, moral things. Because if you think about it, we're instinctively hive mind, tribal, pack creature.
Well, we're an interdependent social species. We are not this. We just, as human beings, I mean, we're a social species that are connected and we're social. Not. Yeah, I mean, my neuroscience class is teaching this. We co-regulate off each other. That's healthy. It's supposed to be that way. But watch out who you're co-regulating with. We're sharing brains, so be aware of whose brain you're sharing space with, because they are impacting each other. Anyway, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, another really great Lisa Barrett book. No longer say so much the better of ourselves, but the healthiest. That's what I'm more interested in now. Maybe it's because I'm 56 going on 57, but I'm like,
I know, I get
it. How do I be the healthiest version of myself? And it is for that core value or that core thing, so that I can contribute, so that my life in whatever way can impact things in a way that's positive, whether it just no longer has to be the world for me. Go to Chris's show, go to 5 Lives, 511. It's so good, especially the back. I mean, the whole thing's good, but the back half is really great. I'm pretty sure that's the place where you went on this whole rant about changing the world. That was just like, it was so great. I was like dancing in my kitchen. Because it's a relief not to have to be responsible for the whole world. And at the same time, know that you still can be fully somebody who cares, who loves people, which includes heartbreak and includes all those things. I think your model gives a way to do that as well, in a way that's healthy. But you're bringing up another good aspect, which is understanding ourselves, how we work, in general. And then I think I'm going to put a little plug here for the Empowerment Compass program that Seek developed, because what it's about is identifying your values, your strengths, your weaknesses, so that when you're shopping for coaches, for personal development, for whatever help, you go in understanding yourself.
Exactly.
This is an even deeper cut at that, understanding
That's
yourself. And, and then you can choose whether you're going to participate in those risky groups or not. Because lots of people participate and they don't come out feeling damaged. That's fine. Yay.
Tell me what you think of this, because I have an analogy to throw out regarding that I was thinking of earlier today, which is, exposure to a cultic group is an awful lot like going to the beach without sunscreen, like,
yeah, good analogy.
If you're there for an hour, you're there for a little while, you're going to go home and, maybe you're going to be fine. Maybe it was a good time for you. Maybe everything was fine, right? And you don't really feel, because you got such a small amount of the skin burning radiation or whatever, right, that it didn't really hurt you. And so you walk away from that experience going, yeah, there's nothing wrong with going down to the beach. But the people who get deeper and deeper in are the people who are there all day. Or the lifeguards, they start working for the group, right? And so they're there being exposed to this all the time. And of course, after a certain point, it's doing nothing but hurting you, that sunlight.
We have skin
right?
cancer.
It's literally killing you. And so people who have casually gone down to the beach can tell you, well, that's no big deal. I don't know why you're making such a big deal about it, because I went and, I didn't get hurt.
What's worse,
contextualize it.
What's worse is, you dummy, you're the one that stayed out in the sun.
And there's that too.
Is so insulting and so naive, honestly. Like, you're just walking into your own sunburn because you somehow think that, those are the most susceptible. It's funny you use the sun analogy, because I have olive skin. So I will go and I get a little bit of a burn, but it turns into this beautiful tan. So for years, in my younger years, I used baby oil and, soaked it all up. So, well, except for now I'm dealing with little brown spots here and this, what I mean? Now as you're aging, it's a little bit of a less of advantage, but that fits into so much of what these groups perpetuate too, which is a little pain is worth a lot of gain. Yeah, and and I'm not advocating for no pain. I don't think that's a reasonable or rational thing, but I don't need to have pain imposed on me by another. I don't need to. I joke all the time. I gave birth to 2 children, and the only reason is because once they're in there, they have to come out. I don't like pain. I'm very pain adverse. Landmark was my peak experience. I do not jump out of airplanes. I do not do that stuff. I don't like any of that.
Fair enough.
But wading into human behavior and working with people to work through their pain, that is something that I've spent a lifetime doing, and probably will spend the rest of my life doing in some way, shape, or form, because I'm compelled. So now I know why. It's part of my moral foundation.
That's right.
So Chris, this is really great. As anybody who's been around Chris and I know, we could talk for literally ever and ever and ever and ever. So this has been really, really, really great. I think opening an introduction as you begin to put this model together in a way that it's consumable for others, right? So it's something that others can really use and try on and look at for themselves and twist and turn. And I know you're very open to feedback and thought. So I hope folks in the comments, please tell us what you think. We're going to be looking to continue to play together, because I think this is a really, really brilliant access to understand. When you start to come out of a high control relationship group, whatever it is, you do get to a point like, wait, what happened? Right. And if you don't get to that point, what I can promise you is you're headed into another group. You're headed into another relationship. If you don't do that work,
speaking, that's the truth.
Yeah. If you don't do the work to deconstruct and understand, you're going to just do a different one in a different way. Maybe it's not a group this time because you go, okay, I got it. I'm going to avoid groups. But you might find yourself in one-to-one relationships that are very damaging and dominating. Or maybe you don't do relationships anymore, but you're going to go do a group. Or, whatever it is, the deconstruction and understanding is so important. So thank you for being such a champion for that, having the courage to share your own journey in a way that those of us who follow behind can really learn and engage. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you. And until we talk again.
Bye-bye.